Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm your host, Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, as always, it's Joe Clark. And actually, Joe, another year older today, wanted to wish him a happy birthday. Gets to spend his day looking at training camp stuff, which hopefully pretty enjoyable for you, Joe. How's your birthday been?
Yeah, no, today's been good. It's always good when there's a fight. So makes for an eventful day. So
Yeah, we'll get to the training camp fights a little bit later. That is one of our topics today, but it's a little bit later in the show. I did want to start just by rounding up some of the training camp stuff that has taken place over the last. Well, I guess our last show was after the first day of practice, so today was the seventh practice. There are 6 additional practices to talk about. Obviously, in this quick 30-minute show, we won't get to everything, but we'll try to hit most of the big things here. I wanted to start off talking about the injury that happened to Roman Wilson on the very first day of padded practice. He got tackled. What was it? Anthony Averett that tackled him, kind of rolled on his ankle a little bit. He ended up getting carted off the field. That is kind of standard practice, pretty much no matter what the injury is, just because of how St. Vincent College is situated. The way back to the training room and the locker room and stuff is pretty far from the field, so it's not at all abnormal for a player to be carted off. Obviously, the concern here, Roman Wilson, he had been doing pretty well at the practices leading up to him getting injured, and so kind of sets him back momentum-wise. The latest report is that it's week to week per Mike Tomlin, and he is wearing a walking boot, so that's kind of the latest on Roman Wilson. Joe, how concerning is this for Roman Wilson, and how early of a contributor he might end up being or not being?
yeah, I think it really just affects his, a couple early week contributions. If he had kept his upward trajectory at camp, especially with the wide receiver depth, maybe he could have earned a role in the slot or as a wide receiver too and been more of an impact guy, come week 1 or week 2. Now he's week to week. Ian Rappaport said yesterday that the Steelers are going to take it slow with his rehab. The target for his return is week 1, but he might not practice or plan any preseason games, really making his return to practice date the week ahead of week 1. And that really is going to set him back, especially with the Steelers, who are usually cautious of their rookies. It's going to be hard for Wilson to kind of earn a role against these guys that have, spent the last month playing football or maybe endear themselves to the coaching staff more than Wilson has, obviously not being able to participate. So I do think it'll affect his early season role throughout the year. He keeps practicing, he gets back up to speed, gets back into, football shape. Then, yeah, maybe he'll week 5, week 6, he'll kind of have that role that maybe he could have had week 1 had he not gone down. But overall, the outlook I don't think is too bad, but I do think it'll affect how much we see Roman Wilson to start the season.
Yeah, and I think even Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Brian Batko, who earlier in the offseason during some of the OTAs or mini camp, one of the two, he kind of said Roman Wilson maybe looked a little less ready to contribute than expected. And I think I just read from Batko earlier today in one of his chats that he's kind of come around on Roman Wilson, and he said he looked way better at camp. So even the people who were kind of unsure were starting to turn into believers before the injuries. So that's a little bit disappointing. We'll see, how effective he can be. Mike Tomlin always talks about hopping back on the moving train. And, training camp's going to continue, and Roman Wilson will really only be able to get mental reps. And really, as a rookie, those mental reps maybe aren't as effective as somebody who's been around for a long time and kind of knows how to prepare themselves. So, yeah, Roman Wilson, I think he had been working mostly in the slot, and, I wanted to talk a little bit about the wide receiver 2 competition, but maybe we'll start with kind of what's happening in the slot. So far, it was kind of Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III getting a lot of work there as well. I know some people thought, including myself actually, that Calvin Austin III might get some looks on the outside. He is obviously undersized. He's probably better suited for the slot, but the Steelers don't have a ton of options, so I thought maybe Calvin would get some looks there, but it has been primarily in the slot for him. And so, Roman Wilson coming back, maybe having to compete with a guy like Calvin Austin, who, if Calvin Austin makes the most of his extra opportunities in week 1 or 2, that could set Roman Wilson back. I mean, last year we saw Calvin Austin III kind of be buried by an Allen Robinson II. I think there was a report that stated they were enamored with his blocking, which is maybe why Calvin Austin didn't get these reps. And so, yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that can happen with especially with a rookie player or an inexperienced player. If they're not able to be on the moving train, that's could set them back. So it's definitely a little bit concerning for now. Obviously, not a long-term thing, and he probably will contribute this year, but maybe we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see that. Now, as far as wide receiver 2, it seems to be boiling down to mostly Van Jefferson at this point. Joe, what's the latest on that? I think he had a pretty good practice today.
Yeah, he caught from 7-on-7. He had a nice deep, I think 40-yard reception from Russell Wilson. First day of practice, he caught a deep ball from Justin Fields. And I mean, of all the receivers they brought in this offseason to kind of compete, the Van Jefferson had the most NFL success. He had almost, I think, 800 plus yard season or close to 800 yards with the Rams in his second year when they won the Super Bowl. Last year in Atlanta's offense, he joined late, but I think he still ended the year as number 3 in terms of receptions out of their wide receivers, which it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a big number at all, but the familiarity with Arthur Smith coming in, I think he started out camp as a number 2, and it wouldn't be a surprise if he ended camp as number 2. Seems to be doing well. Kind of has the body type to play outside, and he's kind of a guy that maybe he could work well with, Russell Wilson here as he gets more up to speed. Obviously, the first throw being to him from 7-on-7s from Wilson today kind of shows maybe a level of comfort between the two of them, even though obviously it's still early. So I would definitely put Jefferson pretty high up in the pecking order of who would be the number 2 as the outside receiver now. Like you said, Austin primarily working on the slot. I don't really think Quez Watkins or Scotty Miller have really the pedigree to become that true number 2 guy. So with Wilson out, I think Jefferson is a pretty heavy favorite now to start the season as the number 2 receiver.
Yeah, and I think we may have talked about it a little bit last week, but Cortland Sutton obviously was restructured there in Denver. Brandon Ayuk, I don't know, nothing has really developed, but he has been. I mean, he was at least seen kind of shaking hands with John Lynch and Shanahan over there in San Francisco. So we'll see what happens on that front. But yeah, it's seeming less and less likely by the day that the Steelers do add somebody from outside, unless it's maybe like a lower level guy or maybe somebody at cut downs, which, I don't know how much you're going to get a starting quality guy at roster cut down. Sometimes it does happen, but yeah, it should be. I mean, Van Jefferson, as long as he keeps looking good, which he seems to be so far, maybe they do just stand pat with what they have at receiver. I think, Roman Wilson was looking good. That's promising. And, it's difficult to say which way it's going to go right now, but I've kind of been leaning with each passing day, leaning more towards them just staying put at wide receiver. They did make a small move. Marquez Callaway was waived, and they brought in Tarek Black. They had brought in Black for a workout. I think it was the day before training camp. They had brought in a trio of receivers, and they ended up signing Black. Not super noteworthy, more of just a guy to fill in while Roman Wilson is hurt, you would think. But you never know. Some of these guys can, surprise or whatever. And there's certainly plenty of training camp left for somebody to make an impression, especially at that thin wide receiver room. Marcus Golden, moving away from receivers. Marcus Golden returned to the team earlier today. That was yesterday after Kyron Johnson and David Perales exited with injuries. Perales was waived as a result of this move. That was the corresponding move to get Golden back. And so they have the exact same outside linebacker group, presumably, that they had last year. And that was a pretty deep and good group all around. And now you got an older Nick Herbig. Joe, are you excited about having Marcus Golden, a veteran, back in the room?
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. And I was honestly surprised they brought him back. I mean, Mike Tomlin yesterday talked about how Herbig's development was a good thing because he got, Jeremiah Moon some more reps, and it seemed like he's a guy that they really want to develop. And I mean, he still could win the job. I don't think, we should necessarily lock the job in as being Marcus Golden. Maybe he's not productive. Maybe he's, he hasn't been signed. Who knows? Maybe he's out of shape or something. I mean, but I would think it is Marcus Golden's job. So it surprised me that, they went the veteran now because like they did with Tariq Black, they could have just signed, one of these random guys off the street, undrafted free agent, like UFL sort of level player. But they didn't. They went and they signed Golden, who had 4 sacks last year. He's had been a double-digit sack guy 3 times in his career. Yeah, I'm super excited that they signed him, and I really hope he does make the roster because I think he's a productive player. He's a great locker room guy. Last season, he was really, I think, an underrated leader of that defense, and obviously he's got the relationship with Denzel Martin. They were roommates in college too, so that might give him a little bit of an upper hand when it comes to sticking on the roster. And now being friends with the outside linebackers coach is never a bad thing. So yeah, I was really excited when I saw this on him. I was shocked, but I was really excited.
Yeah, you have to think they're probably going to keep 9 total linebackers if just looking at what they've done over the last couple of years. And Cole Holcomb, I guess, kind of up in the air. Jerry Dulac threw some cold water on that whole situation, saying he's nowhere near ready to play. That's kind of contrary to some of the things we had seen leading up to camp, and so wait and see what happens with Holcomb, but as of now, he's on the active PUP list. He's not able to practice until they activate him, and Dulac suggested they might even just outright cut him at this point. And if that's the case, you do still have Tyler Medikevich alongside Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts. And then you have your 4 outside linebackers. So in a situation where Cole Holcomb is no longer on the team, yeah, maybe there is a 5th outside linebacker. It would kind of be a competition, I guess, for, who's the better special teamer between a guy like Jeremiah Moon and a guy like Mark Robinson there at inside linebacker. And so that'll be an interesting thing to track as we get a little closer to the end of training camp and seeing how the roster might shake out. And now we're moving on to the quarterback conversation. We have to talk about it. It's obviously one of the biggest stories of camp so far. Russell Wilson mostly has not practiced. He returned limited over the last 2 or 3 days of practice. He did participate in 7-on-7, as you talked about earlier, with connecting with Van Jefferson there, but he's largely been held out of the 11-on-11 periods. I think he had a couple of handoffs on the first day, maybe did he have any more reps like that these last couple of days? If so, and nothing major. They've been taking it easy with him, and so Justin Fields has gotten all these opportunities. Joe, has Justin Fields gained ground, as everybody seems to want to paint that picture?
I think like very marginally he's gained ground in that, the staff gets a feel for the things that he does well and maybe how they can build an offense around him. Getting him in these first team settings a lot more often than they would have had Wilson been healthy. Ultimately, I don't think it's gonna mean a whole lot this season. I think Wilson, he's gonna win the job unless this calf injury is more serious than they're letting on, or he re-aggravates it, or something else happens. I don't think they're turning away from Wilson. Mike Tomlin kind of gave a peek behind the curtain into their use of the word pole position that they've used to describe Wilson. Basically saying that he's in that spot because of his pedigree, his ability to do the things not only on the field but off the field as a leader and as somebody who's been around the game. Obviously, we saw him organize the workouts in San Diego for other receivers. He's really seemingly taking on that role of being QB1, being the leader in the locker room. And on the field, we've seen very little of him. The stuff we have seen, I don't know how much stock you can put in it. Good throw in 7-on-7. Hey, it's great. Like, it's awesome to see that he can still kind of sling it a little bit. Until you really see him in a more of a full-time capacity in camp, I'm not really going to put stock into his performance. And whereas Fields, you have seen him at full-time capacity, and you've seen some of the mistakes over their head. I mean, we saw that throw that was picked off by Dante Jackson, the little floater. We saw the 3 had another interception today. I think it was picked by Thomas Graham. So some of the decision making, some of the processing stuff, I think he's got to be better. But the way he can use his legs is obviously going to be an asset. And in a setting like this, the athletic stuff that he does really well can shine. So yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that maybe he's opened some eyes, and maybe he's a guy that the team is a little bit more impressed with than they were just a few months ago, and they see him in a wider role. But I don't think he's gained significant ground, anything to really change that Russell Wilson's going to be the week 1 starter. I mean, I think the door might be like cracked open very, 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 very slightly in case of, an injury, or if Wilson comes back and like really, really stinks, which I don't really foresee happening. But I don't think anything significant's really changed there. I think Wilson's going to be your guy week 1.
Yeah, and you're referring to Adam Schefter saying that he's opened some eyes, and I think Arthur Smith just after practice today, he spoke to the media and said that Justin Fields has been fantastic, and people are running with that quote. And I think Mike Tomlin talked to CBS Sports yesterday or a couple days ago, and said that they do want to make an environment where these guys compete. And so, I think some of the language that's being used, it does suggest, maybe he has gained some ground. But, that's almost by default. I mean, how could he not, unless he just totally played awful, like you said. So, I'm not at all ready. I know a lot of people are ready to kind of crown Justin Fields the starting quarterback. I'm not ready to do that at all yet. I think, Russell Wilson, as soon as he is able to fully return, which, I don't think he's going to be doing that for Friday Night Lights tomorrow, because that is kind of one of the more intense practices of camp. That would be an interesting one to reintroduce him back into full participation. But, maybe over the weekend or the start of next week sometime. When's their next off day? Is that Monday again? Yeah, so maybe they bring him back on Tuesday and start doing the full participation then. I think as soon as we see him full participation, I think it'll be pretty clear that he deserved that pole position all along. But of course, until it happens, Fields is making the most of his opportunities. Moving into our next topic, kick return pairings. Obviously, tonight is the big night, the Hall of Fame game taking place between the Chicago Bears and the Houston Texans, right? Yeah. And so the debut of the new kickoff rule will be taking place tonight. And so, I think earlier in the offseason, I think Danny Smith or one of the special, I think it was Miles Killebrew, said that one of their meetings was going to be skipped so that they could watch the Hall of Fame game. That's basically going to be their meeting so they can observe the new kickoff rules, all that kind of stuff. Danny Smith just earlier today was interviewed after practice and was talking about how he's getting his team prepared for the new rule, and he's basically talking about it all the time. From what he said, he's every time he talks to the team, he's telling them some specific rule that they might not have known from his studies. He said he's been studying it extremely hard, and so yeah, it's just a matter of getting in enough reps and seeing it enough and drilling it into the players' minds. I mean, they've been playing it the other way their entire lives. Kickoff has maybe experienced some small changes along the way, but this is a totally transformed play at this point, and so a lot of differences. Joe, there was a report about Mike Tomlin working with Madden on this rule. Can you tell me a little bit about that? That's super interesting to me.
Yeah, I was incredibly fascinated by it. NFL.com had a whole big piece today that basically during the league meetings, EA caused the head coaches to do their typical face and body scan so they can put, virtual Mike Tomlin in the game. And it's usually just, I feel like, I don't know this for sure. I've never worked in a video game. Just standard practice. You go and you get your thing and you leave. But Mike Tomlin was asking them, like, hey, how are you guys going to handle the new kickoff rule? Obviously, Tomlin's head of the competition committee. And I think this was this might have been either right before, might have been right after, disregard. I was going to say before the rule was officially instituted. But either way, so he's like, hey, how are you guys getting into the new kickoff rule? And they kind of, showed him, and he asked them, like, within the game, whatever build of the game they had to, mess around with different personnel pairings, put, big guys in, put small guys in, see how it works in a virtual environment. And Mike Tomlin then goes, oh, Madden's a true simulation game. It's really not, but in a setting where they're going to fine tune it to test it exactly how he wants, it at least gives you a visual for how this is going to work. The only visual we really have is from when the XFL did this 2 years ago. So we don't have any, real idea of what it's going to look like. So in the game, he can mix and match with the guys on his roster and put them in different areas. And I think it said that he showed them different blocking schemes and different techniques. So you were saying, like, now you can see a guy pull and work on a trap block, which Dave sent us that whole long study on the XFL. The trap block was on the more effective blocks, I think, from how the XFL from their kick return. So I thought it was super interesting that, Tomlin was kind of proactive about this new rule. Obviously, it's something that he's been more involved with than maybe the average head coach being, as he's on the competition committee. But I think kind of being proactive about that and getting a feel for how it's really going to entail is going to help the Steelers kind of, Danny Smith said they're going to excel at it, and he's always talking about it. And having the head coach be as involved as he is, getting down to the nitty gritty with his virtual players. I mean, they had a virtual TJ Watt at kicker in there for a little bit just to experiment and see how it worked. So I think it's super interesting. We'll see, I guess, if it really gives him an edge. But the fact that he kind of took those steps at least gives you, something you like to see. kind of getting out there and seeing how this is really going to work. Obviously, we won't know until it's actually human beings going out there smashing against each other. But Tomlin kind of, there's a quote in there from him how he said, like, originally you're going to see little guys on little guys, and it's going to be a lot of big plays. Then it'll be big guys on big guys, and it becomes almost more of like an offensive play. Like, you try to get however many yards you can. So I don't know. I'm intrigued by the rule. I'm intrigued by Tomlin being so invested in the rule, and I'm excited to see how it plays out for the first time tonight.
Yeah, and Mike Tomlin on that competition committee that would have sifted through that rule and kind of helped work out all the details of it back when they were voting on it. So yeah, all these things point to the Steelers maybe having it's not a huge leg up, but a small maybe a small advantage just because they've been a little bit more intimately involved with the process along the way there. So yeah, very, very interesting. I think probably by the time this airs, most people will be watching that play happen for the first time. So we're all looking forward to that for sure. And Cordero Patterson, obviously not involved to this point. He's still on the non-football injury list. I think he's been working a little bit more in pre-practice on like the workout bike and just kind of stretching and doing, light workout stuff. He obviously can't practice in any way, shape, or form while he's on that list. So that's very limited what he's able to do, but it's positive to see him out there, getting a little bit of activity in. Whereas, Cole Holcomb, you haven't seen that. And I think Dean Lowry pretty much has just been in his hoodie and not doing anything of note either. So we'll see when he's able to return. For now, the kick return pairings, I thought this was interesting today. I'll run through these real quick. Jalen Warren and John Rice Plumlee. So a quarterback in there, not Justin Fields, but there is a quarterback back there. That's pretty interesting. They were the first team today when the kick return unit was practicing. Calvin Austin III and Quez Watkins, the second group. And Dejan Edwards, the running back, I think he was an undrafted guy this year. And then Jonathan Ward, a veteran running back that they signed out of a rookie. He was a rookie minicamp tryout guy, but he's a veteran, so he's been around. But yeah, those are the three pairings right now. And so Jalen Warren was joking about Justin Fields doing the kick return, and now Jalen Warren himself is back there. And so I think there's a conversation probably to be had. In the interest of time, we won't dive too far into it, but I think there is a conversation about Jalen Warren and, how much do you really want him back there and maybe exposing himself to injury and stuff like that. But obviously once Cordero Patterson returns, all of those pairings are going to be pretty mixed up, I think. So just something interesting to note for now. Moving into topic 3, there were back-to-back on the, was it the first or the second day of padded practice? The second day of padded practice was the first fight, so that was yesterday on Wednesday. And then today, they took the pads off because you can't have pads on for more than 3 days at a time. And obviously Friday Night Lights, they always have the pads on, so they needed to take a day off of pads. We thought maybe that would be a little less chippy because people aren't able to do full contact, but lo and behold, they got into another fight. Joe, we talked about it at the top of the show. Do you like the fight? Mike Tomlin's reaction to the fight. Talk about the fights for us here.
I think if, it becomes more habitual than it has been so far, just these 2 days, then it gets to become a little bit of an issue. But I mean, I like the edge. I like the team having the edge. And yeah, I mean, especially yesterday, who knows? I mean, today's fight, I think, was just Logan Lee and Anderson Hardy got a little chippy. I don't know, pushing and shoving. DeMarvin Leal apparently then came in and started swinging and, things got out of hand. But yesterday's fight is a fight that kind of had to happen. Like, you can't hit the quarterback. And even though Landon Roberts, he didn't go and level him or anything, it was just kind of like a little bit of a shove. But it's still, you don't hit the quarterback in training camp. You don't need a quarterback getting hurt because he gets hit. So it had to happen. And you like to see, I think it was Fautanu was the first guy, kind of gave him a little shove, and Mason McCormick ripped over and kind of leveled him a little bit. As what TJ Watt said, he's like, these rookies, you get a lot of new faces. You're not really sure how these guys are going to act. So you like to see them, running towards the fight. And even Landon Roberts said, he's like, I can't hit the quarterback. Like, the offense reacted how they should have. So, yeah, it was good. And honestly, like, Justin Fields was kind of needling the defense the day before. Like, they had their 7 shots when the offense got a little cocky, and he's needling the defense. Like, oh, those guys weren't happy out there. They're a little bit quiet today. Well, then you're going to get hit maybe a little bit. And, but it's good. Like, it's a healthy back and forth. You like to see both sides get into it. Like, it shows that there's an edge on both sides of the football. So I'm a fan of it. Last year we didn't have any fights. I think there was a big one 2 years ago, I think, with Khalil or Carlos Davis. One of them got hit in the back, and the other one came out and jumped the dude at the very end of practice. But honestly, they're good team bonding experiences too. Like at the end, you all shake hands. It's all kumbaya afterwards. But in the moment, like you got to have some juices, get the competitiveness flowing, and it's I'm certainly a fan of it in this, small little window of, there's 6 or 7 fights, and it's like, all right, what the hell are you guys doing here? Like, come on. But
Right.
the one today didn't even seem like all that bad. The one yesterday was obviously, it seemed pretty physical, and that's good given, the circumstances surrounding it.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Like you said, if it's like a huge trend, then you worry about, is this going to carry over into games, and are they going to be getting all kinds of personal fouls and unnecessary roughness, all this kind of stuff. I know Patrick Queen and Dante Jackson and Landon Roberts. Some of these guys do like chirping, and you know you always hear it's the second guy who gets in trouble. So if one of these players is chirping and then somebody shoves them and then they retaliate, shove them, and the next thing you know, you got a 15-yard penalty or extending drives or killing drives or whatever it might be. So yeah, I mean, that's the worst case scenario, but I don't think this is anything to be concerned about. These fights happen pretty much every year. I mean, you think back to the big one when Dick LeBeau was getting cussed out by Antonio Brown, and the defense considered that man their father pretty much. So they did not take kindly to that one bit. Even guys like Troy Polamalu, one of the softest spoken guys on the planet, is out there blacking out, getting in the fight. So I'm not super concerned. This is kind of par for the course at training camp. They're in the heat. They're hitting each other. They're with each other nonstop for 20 whatever days. So not a huge concern. That's all of our topics for today, but we actually do have a caller. Before I play this call, I did want to plug at the bottom of the screen, 412-254-3145. Again, that's 412-254-3145 at the bottom of the screen. Leave us a voicemail for a chance to have your question answered on a future show. We're going to go here now to Austin from Atlanta.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Ross. This is Austin from down in Atlanta, originally from Indiana, Pennsylvania. Just a quick question. So being down here in Atlanta, the Falcons had played the Steelers 2 times in the last year and a half. The 2023 regular season game in December that the Steelers won 19-16 with Minka's walk-off interception, and then the preseason game in August last year. My question is, the fact that the Steelers beat the Falcons with Matt Canada calling the offense, how much do you think there's a potential for smoking them in week 1, having a coach like Arthur Smith? I know that Atlanta has a new coaching staff and a new quarterback as well, but it's just kind of amazing to me that the Steelers actually had winning seasons with a guy like Matt Canada. Thank you. Love the show.
Thank you, Austin, for calling in. Certainly an interesting question. Basically being the Steelers were able to pretty much do away with the Falcons pretty easily last year's preseason, a couple years ago in the regular season with Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator. His question is, with Arthur Smith, is this going to be as simple as walking in there and just beating up on them with a better offensive coordinator? Now, Austin, I get where you're coming from with this, but I do think, it's worth mentioning, obviously, Arthur Smith was with the Falcons, so there is some familiarity there in terms of that defense is very familiar with what he likes to run. They would have been practicing against it pretty much every week, every day last year. And I mean, obviously, the same is also true for Arthur Smith. He's familiar with a lot of those defensive players, but, there is a new defensive system over there. It's not as comparable to them just knowing his offense, which is, by all accounts, pretty much the same from what it has been in years past. So there's a new defensive coordinator over there. Very well could be a little bit different. So that is something to consider. But Joe, what do you think? Do you think it's as simple as going in there and you know what? We no longer have Matt Canada, so this is a slam dunk.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at 2 teams that are going to have a brand new offensive scheme. And like you said, the Falcons are going to be a little bit more familiar with what the Steelers are going to do than the Steelers are going to be with what the Falcons are going to do under Zach Robinson. I think it's going to be an interesting game. You have Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins against each other. There's a lot of storylines. I think it might be a game where it's just kind of both teams feeling each other out early. You have both teams running a new offense, going to get settled in. And I mean, Kirk Cousins is a really good quarterback. You have Drake London over there at receiver, obviously Bijan Robinson in the backfield, Kyle Pitts. So it's a team that has a lot of weapons on offense in Atlanta. Defense, not as good. They still got some pieces there. They got Jesse Bates, AJ Terrell. I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think the Steelers are going to come in and kind of put a hurting on them. Do I think the Steelers might wind up winning? I do, but it'll be interesting. I mean, we just kind of have to see, but I don't think by no means do I think it would be a blowout. It would be awesome if it was, if the Steelers just came in and put on a smackdown, new offense, really meshes, but I think it'll be like a 24-20 sort of game. So I mean, we'll see. I'd love to be wrong, but I think it's going to be a close one.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. I do. Kirk Cousins, I think he had an interview with Steve Smith on one of the like inside training camp things, and he was talking about the process. He was just cleared with his for work or whatever, so he is expected to play in week 1. But he was talking, and it didn't sound. It is quite a process working back from an Achilles. He's still talking about how he's building back trust in that in his body to kind of withstand the rigors of the NFL, and he didn't sound too. A lot of players will give off the "oh yeah, I'll be fine" kind of vibe. He was a little bit more apprehensive about the whole thing, and so we'll see. I mean, he is up there in age. He's the same age there as, or roughly the same age as Russell Wilson, and so yeah, I think it should be an intriguing matchup. The other thing to consider is the Falcons. This game is in Atlanta. I was at that game that you were talking about 2 or 3 years ago, whatever that was, when Minkah Fitzpatrick called game. It was pretty much 70 or 80% Steelers fans there. So that thing's basically going to be a Steelers home game. It is a dome environment, so you don't have to worry about the blazing heat of Atlanta at the beginning of September. So I think there are a lot of favorable things for the Steelers. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you can at all just assume that that the Steelers are going to go in there and smack them up just because they don't have Matt Canada anymore. If that was the case, the Steelers would go 21-0 or 20-0, as Russell Wilson suggested the other day that's his goal. So we will see. But that is all of our topics here and our listener question. Thank you again, Austin, for calling in. We hope somebody else calls in and gives us some more questions to answer. There's plenty to talk about, plenty of questions to answer these days with training camp taking place. Again, I want to wish my co-host Joe Clark a very happy birthday, and we will catch you guys next time.